My name is Doug Kuntz. I am the Director of Content Strategy with PlanetRetail RNG. And today we're going to be talking about supply chain and fulfillment. For the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be your tour guide. And a couple housekeeping issues before we get started here. There is an opportunity for some Q&A at the end if we have time, but anything that I'm not able to answer in the 30 minutes that we have, our team will follow up and provide our thoughts or feedback or input as best we can to whatever question you have if we don't get to it today. So I do encourage you to use that functionality. Should be on the right side of your little GoToWebinar panel there, a little chat feature that we'll get to. As I said, today we're talking about the supply chain and fulfillment, and as you'll see, this topic is very significant to us. It is one of what we call our 4 winning strategies. And as background, those of you that are familiar with PlanetRetail RNG and our business, is we like to use this framework that we call STEEP. It's just an acronym that stands for Society, Technology, Economy, Industry, and Policy. But what it allows us to do is identify all of the drivers of change that we think are going to impact the future retail landscape. And when you paint that picture and start to unpack what it takes to win in that scenario, what it points you to is these 4 key areas. Supply chain and fulfillment is one of them, but really supply chain and fulfillment is being impacted by those first 2 things on the left, the store of the future and e-commerce and digital ecosystems. And essentially the supply chain as well as our fulfillment capabilities are having to evolve to serve a changing store that plays a changing role in our industry. And obviously you can't talk about the changes and disruptions to the supply chain without talking about e-commerce. And so what we're going to talk about today is really how those 2 dynamics are impacting the capabilities that we need to win in the future by making sure that our supply chain is competitive, and more importantly, a competitive advantage that can beat our competitors. And then the 4th one, we're not going to talk much about shopper engagement and retention, but really it's just about how the way we communicate and interact with our shopper is different in a digital world. And actually, fulfillment responsiveness and supply chain capabilities do play a role in that, at least in terms of delivery times and promises. So we'll touch on that just a bit today as well. But to get started, I think it's not too dramatic to say that supply chains will differentiate the winners and the losers in the future. Obviously, the growth of e-commerce is having a huge impact on this. We're going from being able to drive all of our volume and all of our supply chain resources and sales volume through physical stores, which tend to be pretty efficient. We'll unpack that a bit in a moment. But now we have all of these different ways that we have to get products to our shoppers, and that's more fulfillment methods that we need to be able to adapt to or be compliant with, more routes to the end consumer, whether it's home delivery, through a click and collect model, a pickup center, physical store, and a variety of other things. And also the expectations of our shopper are changing, right? We talk about this idea of the on-demand consumer, which really just means that the consumer is more demanding. They expect fast, they expect convenient, and our supply chain and fulfillment capabilities need to be designed and invested in so that we can really meet those demands, because our competitors, the leaders in the industry, we'll talk a little bit about Amazon and Alibaba and a few others, things that they're doing in this space. They are leaders in this space and are driving a lot of this disruption. And so what you end up with is a really new set of capabilities required to compete and to win. And ultimately, it does all come down to economics. Can we do this efficiently, or can we do it efficiently enough so that we can continue to invest in back into our business, both physical stores as well as the e-commerce side of the business as well. And so that's the backdrop of why we're here today and why we think supply chain and fulfillment is as important as it is. Obviously, you can't talk about it without talking about that economics challenge, but there's a lot of other things here that are critical challenges to building a successful future supply chain. And it's not just about cost, it's not just about speed, but it's about balancing those two things, making sure that what our customer needs, what we can realistically deliver, and what we can deliver profitably are aligned. This navigating operational complexity within our business as there's more routes to the end consumer just gets so much more complicated, and where we have to do it faster, we have to do it closer, we have to get it nearer to the consumer at all times. And so proximity remains a huge challenge here. Not just can you do it, but how do you do it? And then of course we have all of these legacy systems, processes, organizational structures, where in many cases e-commerce and the store-based teams don't necessarily collaborate in the way that they could or should. We're used to doing things in a really efficient way. We got really good over the last 30 or 40 years of getting product from a manufacturer's warehouse onto a truck, into a retailer's warehouse, and then a full truckload out to a Walmart supercenter once a week. And that world is changing really quickly as volume moves online and volume gets disaggregated across a whole bunch of different fulfillment options and places you can buy. And so if you think about what it really takes to win inside of your organization, it's not just about these new capabilities, new technologies, but it's about reorganizing businesses and how they work and how they interact to make sure that they can really achieve this in the future world. And so when you ask us, after doing a whole bunch of research on this topic, evaluating all of the tests, trials, demands that retailers are placing on their supplier partners and the things that they're testing on their own, these are the four core characteristics that we think really define a seamless supply chain. And that's and the first one is automated, the second is agile, the third is real time, the fourth is promiseable. I'll talk about all four of these things in more detail as we go, but individually, what it means for each of these items is automated just means fewer touches and fewer decisions by human hands, right? And so that's robotics, that's artificial intelligence, that's some of the shiny objects like trucks and drones, but really it all comes down to how do we maximize speed and minimize cost, minimize the dollars required to execute this thing. And ultimately that comes down to automation, because we need to limit the amount of touches and we need to speed up the rate of decision making and the efficiency of decision making. And data is going to help us do that. Agile is it's about how we're moving from that truckload of distribution that I talked about to a much more fragmented, spread out route to the end consumer across lots of different touch points with lots of different options. And so what happens to our organizations, to our inventory planning, to our inventory management, to our promotion, demand planning, all of these things, what happens when we're no longer just getting products to consumers on the retailer's shelf and on a supercenter or hypermarket shelf. The third is real time, and that's again about shorter planning, having visibility into our supply chain exactly when we need it, not just kind of not it just going off into sort of a black box and then reappearing somewhere and we discover we have inventory one place or another. This is about the visibility and the knowledge to execute an agile supply chain. And then Promiseable is just about guarantees. It's about fill rates and service rates and just getting products to the places they need to be on time when we promise they're going to be there. And as we'll talk about, that really does become the backbone of a successful supply chain. But where we're going to start is with Agile. And the thing you need to understand about Agile is that we have a much more fragmented supply chain. You can look across all of these different ways that now we can fulfill an order. I shouldn't even say fulfill an order, that a consumer can make an order, that order is picked and packed, that order is delivered, and then ultimately how that customer receives it. So we've listed all of these different fulfillment routes or fulfillment options, and number one in each of these four columns, you'll notice says consumer or by consumer. And that's what the traditional shop looked like. The traditional shop meant I went to the store, I selected the items I wanted to buy, I brought it out to the checkout. Sure, there was someone there that was scanning it for me and helping me put it into bags maybe, but I grabbed those bags, I put them in the trunk of my car, I drove them home, I took them out of the trunk of my car, I brought them into my kitchen or into my house and unpacked all of those items. Well, it's pretty obvious that all of those roles are fulfilled by the consumer itself. One of the challenges with e-commerce that it's introduced is a lot of those roles have taken the burden that the consumer used to have and put that on the retailer or on the manufacturer. And so there are lots of new ways to get products to our end shopper, but the challenge is that most of those new ways bear significantly higher costs, whether it's more labor, expensive kind of technology and process and infrastructure investments, or even just complications and complexity of having to manage all of these different routes to the end consumer. And so when you add up all of those permutations, those 5 ways to order, those 9 ways to pick and pack, 8 ways to deliver, 9 ways to receive, that all those permutations add up to about 3,240 routes to the end consumer. Now, not every combination makes sense for the shopper, and not every combination makes sense economically for our business. But I do want to highlight that there's so many more ways we now need to get products to the consumer, and it involves changing those 4 variables. But as we look across the industry and ask ourselves, okay, what are the prevalent models? What are the models that retailers and brands are investing in now, trialing now, are most common currently? We've identified 8 prevalent models. The traditional store there is still, of course, at the top. You see a variety of click and collect models here. Some are fulfilled in a store, some are fulfilled in a fulfillment center or a dark store. Sometimes the consumer needs to come into the physical store to pick it up. Sometimes it's kind of either a drive-through or a curbside model where they can stand in their car or don't have to come all the way into the physical store. You get a little more convenience that way. Sometimes they are getting delivered from a local store, and sometimes I think we all know what National Ship is. It's kind of getting home delivered from more of a centralized location. But what I wanted to highlight here is the work expands considerably and the cost expands considerably if we can't get a shopper into our store at all. So the traditional store obviously is going to remain a pretty efficient way to get products to consumers, but the difference between a click and collect model and a home delivery model tends to be really significant in terms of cost and complexity. If we can get the shopper to still drive to the store and walk in somewhere, or at least get out of their car to pick up an order, that really can improve the efficiency and the leveraging of infrastructure for our bottom line. And so what you see is retailers all over the world. This is an example from Alibaba. We can make the exact same one for Walmart or for Amazon, for JD.com, Carrefour, Auchan, Casino. There's lots of big retailers all over the world that are really testing a variety of fulfillment models. What you see is all of these retailers testing, figuring out what works, what they can operate efficiently and profitably, and also what consumers really want to be a part of. And so our guidance to brands and to manufacturers working with retailers is always to be selective and be decisive about where they choose to partner and how they choose to partner, but make sure that they're investing in learning and optimizing against some of these new fulfillment requirements, particularly those that they think are going to be more efficient or effective, or more at least important to a specific retail partner. It's likely that the fulfillment models that win with Walmart and win with Alibaba and win with Amazon and win with Carrefour, they may all be different. And so it's not going to be a one size fits all situation. The local consumer has a lot to do with how much this which of these things get picked up and invested in and become more popular. And so I'd encourage everyone to be really intentional and decisive about where they choose to partner, because ultimately being on the front lines, a lot of these models is going to be really important to success. As we'll talk about in just a minute, there's a lot of capability building that comes behind these tests that we're going to want to be prepared for. The second part, one of those characteristics, is real time. And we talked about agile, how fluid and how flexible we're going to need to be to get products from point A to point B to our end consumer. And I shouldn't say point A to point B because it's a lot more complex than that. But the second is real time, and really real time traditionally means speed. We did a study of 25 of the top e-commerce retailers around the world in key markets, the US, UK, Japan, China. And of those top retailers, 80% of those retailers were offering same-day delivery. And almost every leader across all of those markets were offering same-day delivery. And as we know, shoppers are getting more demanding. They're expecting convenience. Fulfillment speed comes with that. It becomes a really important decision-making criteria if a shopper's looking at two fairly similar brands or products and deciding whether they want it tomorrow or whether they want it in 2 days. And so suppliers, retailers, first of all, really need to be responsive and acknowledge that need. They're going to do it in a combination of delivery partnerships and third-party partnerships, some of their own investment in delivery capabilities, and as well as try to leverage their physical stores. And actually, pure play e-commerce retailers are going just the opposite direction. We know they built all of these pretty extensive delivery capabilities. They've expanded pickup locations, but they're continuing, as you see, to leverage physical assets and stores to accelerate and facilitate their own fulfillment options. So that's click and collect partnerships, and that's partnerships with building their own physical stores as well to facilitate some of this. I think if there was one thing I left you with about real-time retail, it's that our inventory forecasting, our visibility of where our inventory is, and our need to meet demand with much shorter notices is only going to accelerate. And so, do we have the organizational processes? Do we have the teams set up to really meet rapid decision making and response times? If those of you that work on e-commerce right now probably already feel the impact of one day of out of stocks and how much that negatively impacts your business, well, as fulfillment times and delivery times accelerate, that's only going to be more extreme, and those out of stocks are going to be more visible. And I think that really does have a cascading effect for sales growth, visibility, search results, all of those things online. So the third is automated. And I think automated is pretty self-explanatory to most. We obviously have the common automation that people are aware of: warehouse management automation, robots packing orders inside of warehouses. You have drones and autonomous trucks, autonomous delivery. Some of these things have been tested already live in a few markets. And those are obviously play a big role in speed and efficiency and limiting labor. But the other part of this is about automated decision making. It's about inventory planning, where we place inventory to make sure that we have it in the right areas in anticipation of future orders. It's about making sure that no matter how many ways our products move across and through the supply chain with our retail partners, that we never have an empty shelf or inventory of zero listed online. It's about making sure that we're optimizing the way we get product to a consumer. So whether that's here's the fastest route for our delivery truck to get to this home or get to this group of homes, all the way to optimizing which couriers, which suppliers we ship through to fulfill one order, right? What you see from Alibaba and JD is these networks of couriers across China, where not every courier fulfills the same type of order everywhere, because based on where that order needs to go, based on where that order needs to be sourced from, and the other items that it needs to be combined with, there's a lot of different options for how we get that product to the end consumer. And so this connected network, all driven by data and automated decision making and artificial intelligence, is really going to be what powers that efficiency and fulfillment speed in the future. And then I mentioned Promiseable being the backbone of the supply chain before. I think the important call out for Promiseable, it's obviously, can I guarantee that it's going to be to you in 1 day or 2 days? The damage of that not happening is pretty catastrophic. It's why you start to see more and more retailers and some brands with direct to consumer guarantee delivery times. Hey, I guarantee it's going to be to you by this date, or we'll give it to you free. That not only does that encourage confidence in the shopper, but it's sort of sets table stakes for retailers competitively. But the other part of this beyond guarantees is about traceability. And do you know where the product came from, where the product was sourced from, how it's been transferred? This idea of product integrity, whether that's ingredients, whether that's sustainability, is going to be even more important in the supply chain, is really what enables all of that. Right now, you see when you go into your local grocery store, these apples or these bananas were picked from a certain farm. Well, imagine that becoming far more complex, and we providing the consumers so much more information on products that aren't just maybe produce and some beauty products and some baby food, let's say. There's we've got an arms race of traceability here, and supply chain is going to be what enables that. And then the last part I want to call out about Promiseable is it of course impacts that guarantees of will you have the products on the shelf are of course driven by inventory forecasting and planning, but it's also about online visibility. So can you, not only is it there when you get to the store, and do you commit to what you say you're going to do, but in anticipation of an order, can you go to a retailer's website, or can you go to Google and see that there are a number of units in stock that are ready to be bought right now, right? All of these things have a major impact on the our ability to guarantee that products are going to be where consumers want to buy them, and they're going to be there when we promise they'll be there. And so when you add up automated, agile, promisable, real time, it clearly creates all sorts of challenges for our future supply chain, right? We need to adapt our assortment. We need to adapt our products. We need much stronger partnerships with retailers and third parties to make sure we're being as efficient and cost effective as possible. We need to break down all of these silos that don't allow us to communicate right now, so that we can remove touch points. We can create this dynamic, connected inventory system that increases speed and limits cost. You know, when we look at what is required, we've identified 6 key capabilities. There's obviously a million things involved in executing this supply chain that we just laid out, but supply chain packaging and product optimization, which I'll talk about in just a moment here, is obviously a huge enabler of this. All of these requirements for real-time inventory management, what we call fulfillment versatility, data and systems integration. Are we connected in a way that retailers and suppliers and third parties can actually share information and make smart, optimal decisions, as opposed to doing everything blindly, perhaps duplicating effort or doing something really inefficient? And then that organization itself, both internally and externally, are we aligned to these needs? Right now, I think for most organizations, the answer is no. And borderless commerce management, I'm not going to talk much about cross-border commerce, but it's going to get only more complex when Alibaba and Amazon and JD and Walmart build these global networks that promise delivery within 3 or 4 days anywhere in the world. That impacts how we need to collaborate within our teams internally. That impacts the product and assortment and the pricing and promotion, all of these other capabilities that we take for granted. I didn't mention at the start of this, but this presentation is on the back of our latest supply chain and fulfillment research, publishing our third winning strategy report on this exact topic. There's a lot more research where this came from than I'm able to cover today, and I'll share with you how to get access to this just shortly. But when we look at these key capabilities, these are the things we think everyone should be losing sleep over. These are the things we should be investing our time, our money, and our organizational resources in, because ultimately these are the things that are going to differentiate who wins and who loses. Doing this efficiently, doing this and not losing tons of money, creating competitive advantage out of our supply chain and our ability to get products to consumers quickly and efficiently. There'll be a huge gap between the people that can do that and those that can't. And so the only characteristic that I'll be able to talk about today is that product and packaging optimization. But there's a wide range of what that means for the future supply chain. This is about being compliant inside warehouses for automation. This is about being compliant for the delivery itself, making sure products are able to kind of hold up to the demands of shipping, whether that's weather, whether that's getting bounced around in a truck. And it's also about efficiency. Can we ship it in its own container? Can we break apart packs really easily? And can we ultimately have this be part of our brand as well? There's an example there from Uniquely J, which is Jet.com, Walmart's subsidiary's private brand. This bold packaging to grab attention online, right? How do we use packaging and products to stand out on the shelves, not only in the physical store but also on the digital shelf? And so, like I said, this is really, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what I've covered today and some of the research that's available to all of you. But to give you a sense of how much more this is going to change, we have all of these technologies that we've barely even begun to scratch the surface of, whether it's blockchain, floating warehouses, urban drone fulfillment centers, autonomous vehicles. You've seen lots of tests about retailers starting to deliver stuff into people's cars that are parked around the city, or even into their physical apartments, having an ability to open the door and drop off the product inside. You know, we haven't talked about artificial intelligence, augmented reality, the way technology can be embedded in our packaging. There's so much change on the horizon that's not only going to change what we need to do, but also create all sorts of new opportunities to engage with shoppers, to collect data, to influence, to be more efficient. But ultimately, if I was to paint you a picture of what the supply chain in the future is going to look like and what we need to work towards, is an integrated, connected network where retailers, suppliers, and third-party delivery partners are truly partnering. We use this term partnering, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but truly connected and working together to get products to the end consumer as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Now, that probably means that there are fewer transactions actually taking place on the retailer website. That means it's a combination of drop shipping, direct to consumer, fulfilled by retailer, fulfilled by courier network, but it's all powered by integrated data systems. It's all powered by really flexible warehousing, flexible packaging, and also some dedicated investment in e-commerce and the supply chain, dedicated e-commerce SKUs, dedicated investment to providing more traceability and some of that real time and agility that I talked about, and also prepared to compete or to manage the challenges created by cross-border commerce. We're just starting to touch the surface, scratch the surface of how this supply chain is going to have to evolve. And I hope what we talked about today gives you just a little bit of a taste of how that's changing. Obviously, this is a massive topic. I've talked about it for 30 minutes. I already mentioned that there is a much larger piece of research or report on the supply chain and fulfillment of the future that we just published last week. If you are a client of PlanetRetail RNG, you can download the report on our portal. You have access to that right now. It should be sitting right on the homepage as you log in. For those of you that aren't subscribers and current customers of ours, we're happy to connect with you and give you more of a taste of what the kind of the future supply chain and the capabilities that we have in the future are going to look like, and help you work through some of those challenges. If you want to talk to me, if you want to talk to our team, we are always available and happy to answer any questions. I mentioned that Q&A functionality. Please feel free to send in some of those questions, and we'll happily follow up. But if you see both our business's contact information, info at PlanetRetail, it's the easiest way to get in touch with our team, and then myself, you can see my email there as well. And you know what, if you're working through something really specific and we kind of touched on something that's relevant to you, we do a lot of custom advisory work with our customers right now on these exact topics, whether it's identifying partnership opportunities, whether it's identifying the fulfillment models of the future that we think will be more popular and therefore that you should invest in, whether it's benchmarking existing capabilities and figuring out exactly how far you need to push yourself and extend your business to make sure that you're a leader in this space. We are working on these topics every single day and are happy to do so, or to kind of explore doing the same with you. So again, there's our contact information. The report is available. This recording and will be available to all of you as a follow-up as well. And I just want to thank you again for joining us, encourage you to remain focused on this topic, as we do think it's going to be perhaps the most important differentiator. It's certainly going to be the enabler of all of these digital, omni-channel, and e-commerce pure play strategies that you're all working on right now. So with that, I will give you back the rest of your day. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.